Hello everyone, my name is Daria Hoover and I'm a realtor at Keller Williams Realty East Bay, and today my guest is Michael Arkelian. Michael was a criminal defense attorney for 30 years in the Sacramento County Public Defender's Office. He's also a past president of the 4,000-member California Public Defenders Association, representing all 58 counties in the state. As a public defender, he tried over 150 jury trials, including 26 murder trials and 2 death penalty murder trials. During the years that he was chair of CPDA legislative committee, he testified in hundreds of hearings in the state legislature regarding pending legislation and wrote 3 bills that became state law. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming here and spending the time with me.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so let me ask you some questions. Where were you born, raised, and where did you go to school?
I was born in Sacramento, California, where we only lived for about 3 years before we moved a couple of times. And from the time I was about 5 years old, I have lived in Orinda, in the East Bay here. I went away for a job thinking it would be a few years in Sacramento. I ended up staying about 40 years.
Oh, wow.
But then I moved back to my parents' house in Orinda after my mother passed away. So I am back to where I almost began.
Okay, so where did you go to school?
I went to high school here in Orinda. I went to the University of California, Davis for college. And I went to UC Hastings, although I don't think they call it that anymore, in San Francisco for law school.
So you were a criminal attorney, right?
Yes, I was. I've retired.
Okay, so when did you retire?
I think about 10 years ago.
Oh, okay, that's good. Can you share interesting stories related to your work?
Yes. I think there are 2 types of stories related to my work. One is very sad and tragic. I am seeing people at probably the worst time in their lives. They have either committed a crime and are being charged with it and are facing prison, or they did not commit the crime and they are being unjustly charged with it, which is even worse for them. So a lot of the experiences I had were helping people through those times in their lives, and those are kind of sad. On the other hand, I was in a service club, a Lions Club, with another attorney and I think 2 police officers. And we decided that between the 4 of us, we could come up with enough stories for almost an entire season of one of those Law and Order television shows. The problem is that our stories were so strange that probably nobody would believe them, even though they were true. So I do have those stories as well. The funny, strange, dumb criminal stories, I guess people call them. Mm-hmm. And I could share a couple, sure. Okay. I represented one man who got drunk one night, and he decided that he was going to rape a woman. So he went into a large apartment complex, broke into this single woman's apartment, and proceeded to pass out drunk on the floor before he could do anything. Then the woman awoke because the man started snoring. She knew that she was alone, so she got out of bed to see what was happening. She stepped on the man, who woke up and proceeded to try and rape her. But she started screaming, he got scared, and he left the apartment, unfortunately leaving his wallet behind with his driver's license. She called the police. The police got there fairly quickly. In the meantime, my client got lost in the apartment complex and couldn't find his car. The police ran the driver's license, found the make of the car and the license, and actually arrived at the car before he did. So by the time he got back to his car, the police were there waiting for him. This man was not the brightest of my clients. But there were many like that, unfortunately. Another story, and these are true stories, like I say, probably no one would believe them, but a young man went in to rob a bank. The bank tellers have two protocols that they're supposed to do when people rob the bank. One is a little button underneath the counter that silently calls for the police, and the other is what they call a die pack. It's a group of bills that are chemically treated so that when they take them out of the till, at some point, a few minutes later or whatever, it explodes and is very painful, and it creates purple or red or orange dye, which is difficult to get out of. This young man, went to the bank, robbed the bank at gunpoint. The teller did what she was supposed to do. She gave him the die pack. He put it into a paper bag and proceeded to put the paper bag down the front of his pants. He walked out of the bank, true story, unfortunately, and within a few minutes later, the die pack, of course, did what it was supposed to do. It exploded. And not only were his very private, sensitive parts very painful, but they were, I think, a bright purple for about a week before he could get rid of it. But by that time, he was in jail. So the die pack did its job, which made it more difficult for me to do my job, unfortunately. So those are just two instances. We could talk for hours about some of the strange cases that I've had. Some of them are just very tragic. And,
Can you give me an example of a tragic one?
A woman who was in her 50s, I would say, had been caring for her mother for many years. Her mother passed away. They were very, I believe the term is codependent on each other. She was down south of Sacramento, I think in Lodi or some small town there. They had a service and a reception at the funeral. She proceeded to drink way too much and was very depressed. And she got in her car, possibly trying to commit suicide. I never really asked her about that, and she did not volunteer. But in any event, she drove way too fast. She got up to Sacramento, and she had an auto accident with three young girls, teenagers, in a car. One of them was not wearing a seatbelt, and she got ejected from the car and was killed. And my client, the woman, was devastated, but the damage had been done, and there wasn't much she could do about it. And she ended up going to prison, which ruined two lives. So those are the tragic ones, and there are a lot of those as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So what was your most favorite part of work?
I was very lucky. I did not realize at the time, although I do now, that most of the people in the country, perhaps in the world, do not have a passion for their work. They go to work, they earn money, they have a passion for their families or things outside of work. Work is just a means to get money to survive. For 30 years, or actually about 32, I had a passion. I loved going to work every day. I had a very weird job. Most people would not understand it. I represented people that nobody would even want to take home for lunch, let alone have much to do with. I spent half my days in jail. I was in jail, although I was just interviewing people, and the other half in court. But it was a work that quickly became a passion. It's very addictive for some people like myself who love to argue, to get up in front of a jury, to get in the struggle, the battle in a jury trial, to analyze issues and such. And so where most people, I think, would say, I have to go to work today, most of the days I ended up saying, I get to go to work today because I loved it. So I retired a few years early to take care of my mother, who was in her 90s and needed some help. I might have been there until now if that hadn't come up. So that was the best part of the job.
You were honored to go to work?
Yes, actually I was. And I know it sounds strange for most people, but it was, and given the job, there were so many depressing parts of the job. And it was one of those strange jobs where the better you do your job, the more the public hates you for it, because they want all these people put in jail for the rest of their life, and I was trying to get them out.
So what was your least favorite part of work?
The least favorite is that over the years, a job like that takes little bits and pieces out of you. You can only go through that experience for so long. I never got to the point where I got burned out, but a lot of attorneys do, and or a lot of attorneys turn to alcohol and have alcohol or substance abuse problems to cope. But that's the problem. Or if a client got sentenced to a sentence that I thought was too harsh or undeserved, we could appeal the case, but there wasn't much else we could do about it. So all of those things take little pieces out of you over the years, and it takes a toll.
So all those clients did deserve the sentence, but you were still trying to make their life better by either reducing the sentence or getting them completely out of jail, right?
Yes, for the most part, if the police do their job correctly and the district attorney, the prosecutor does their job correctly, then the system works. And if the person is guilty, they should be found guilty. And I know it's strange for a defense lawyer to say that, but every now and then something wrong happens. The police don't do their job right. They cut corners. There are a lot of examples even now of police who are not doing their job the way they're supposed to. Or if the district attorney charges the wrong charges or tries to get a sentence that is, I think, undeserved, then that's where we come in and try and correct that and do our best to represent the client. Everybody has a constitutional right to be represented if they're charged with a crime. And I say everybody because it's not just citizens, it's everybody in the country. And they also have a legal right to have a lawyer. And if they cannot afford their own lawyer, they have a right to have a free lawyer, so that we do not get in a situation where only rich people can afford to be represented. And that's what a public defender is. But because of that, we don't just hire clients like ex-presidents of the United States. We have to deal with everybody who comes through our door. And we, other than if there's a conflict of interest or some other issue, we cannot refuse to represent somebody. If I get a case on my desk, I take that case.
So you were a public defender?
Yes.
And who paid you then?
The County of Sacramento.
Oh, okay.
There are 3 levels of public defenders. One is federal. That's if you get charged with a federal crime, like a certain ex-president is being. The other is state. They do mostly appeals and not trial work. And then there are county public defenders. Every state has counties, every county has public defenders. They deal with the large majority of crimes and clients.
That's what you did?
That's what I did.
Okay. If you could go back in time, what would you have done differently at work or everywhere else?
I don't know that I would have done anything really differently. As it turned out, I had a great career, and I got to do most of what I wanted to do. I did have one legal fantasy, I guess, and that was I would have loved to have been either a prosecutor or a defender at the International War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague, in the Netherlands. But that requires that's a different career path. That's like Mr. Smith, Jack Smith, did before he was appointed the special prosecutor on the Trump case. And that requires a lot of preparation, and it's a different kind of job. And I didn't, by the time I wanted to do that, I was too much into my career. But we all have our fantasies, and that was one of them. So
It's just a wish, right?
a wish.
You
I
to
wish
do
it would have been nice, yes, to do that. Yes, it's too late now. Of course, I'm not a young man anymore.
You look young.
Ah.
My other question is, in your practice, have you ever seen anyone taking a blame for a crime that they have not committed?
I really have not. I've seen it in the other direction. I had a case one time where a man clearly did not match the description, and he said he didn't, of the person committing the crime. And although the identifying factors were mostly the same, it turned out it was his brother, who was not a very nice brother. And his brother was trying to get my client, his brother, convicted so that he didn't have to face the crime. I had another trial where a woman befriended my client. I don't know if they had a love affair or not, but they were fairly close. And the woman killed her husband and tried to blame it on my client. And he actually got convicted of it. But we had a very good district attorney who kept looking into the case, and a couple of years later brought my client back. They had new evidence, and they ended up actually convicting the lady of killing her own husband. But I have not had any in the other direction.
Taking the blame
For somebody else, even though they had not committed the crime. I can see how it might happen, maybe with a spouse or a parent, but I never had any of those.
I'm asking that because I do know someone who did take a blame for his son. His son killed someone, and the father took the blame and served the term in prison. And he got out. I don't know how he exactly did it, if he lied that he did commit the crime, or he upfront said that he did not, but they imprisoned him anyway. I don't know exactly how it worked out, but it did.
Well, you can never minimize a parent's love of their child, so I can see how that might happen. I just did not have any of those kind of situations.
Yeah, I think it's crazy. And obviously, Jesus Christ paid for people's sin without himself committing.
That's
any
very
sin.
true.
So he's the biggest example of that sacrificial love, right? Or
Right.
Sacrifice.
Yes.
This is what comes to my mind because I'm a Christian. But also this pastor and preacher, Charles Finney. Have you heard of him? He was a lawyer by profession. And he really struggled with the concept of Jesus Christ paying for someone else's sin. He said only the person who is guilty has to pay for the crime, and not someone else should pay for him. So he really couldn't accept that concept.
Which I assume made it difficult for him to be a pastor.
Yeah.
Because now there is a little difference, I think, because Jesus was paying for humanity's sins.
Right.
And the concept of a sin and an actual crime are a little bit different, but it's the same kind of situation.
Yeah, similar. And yeah, he couldn't accept the fact that someone could pay for, someone innocent would take the blame.
Yeah.
Like, is it hard for you to accept that concept?
No. If I were that parent of that child and I were older and the child had his whole life in front of him, I probably would be tempted to do the same thing.
So you don't have any problem an innocent person paying? Like, that it means like you don't have a issue with that, right? Like, as long as someone pays for the crime, that's good, right?
Well, not necessarily. If the person, in that situation, the father voluntarily took the blame for something he didn't do to help his son.
Right.
The more common situation in my career has been where somebody who actually did commit the crime does not want to take the blame,
So is
and
that
is more than happy with somebody else being convicted, even though that person, did not commit it and does not deserve to go to jail. And there is no relationship or anything. It's just somebody who does not want to pay for his crime, his sins. And that's, I think, a very different situation. So, and I have had a few of those where, not too many, over the thousands of cases that I've done, but fewer than people might think. But still, I know there are people in prison who are innocent, and we're finding that out. From time to time, you'll see an article in the newspaper where somebody did 30 years, and then finally somebody else confessed to the crime. So I do have a problem with innocent people being convicted and locked up. But those are different situations.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Would you like to share anything else with the public, or give any warnings about how to avoid trouble, or whatever you want to give as an advice? Or
from the time that I became a public defender, I was about 25 or 6 years old, very young. I heard people say, and it's mostly in the media, but not always, I don't want a public defender, I want a real lawyer. And I've heard that more times than I can count. And it drives me crazy when I hear that. Because criminal law is a specialty like any other kind of law. Similar with doctors who have different specialties. A lot of times when people decide they want to hire an attorney, they'll hire somebody who does divorce work for most of the year, or taxation work. And then they get into court, they come into court maybe once a year. Public defenders, that's all they do. That's all I ever did and I was in court at least almost part of every single day of the week, dealing with judges, dealing with motion work, dealing with trials. So the reality is just the opposite. Public defenders in a criminal case are normally far more experienced and far better than hiring some other so-called real attorney in quotations. Mm-hmm. And so that used to kind of drive me crazy. But the media keeps, I can't count the number of television shows where I've seen, oh, he only had a public defender and that's why he got horrible representation and on and on. So
that's not true.
So that's my 20-second vent about being a public defender.
Anything else you want to share besides?
No? Well, I mean, I could share another 2 hours worth of stories, but I don't think you have the time for that.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being here.
You're very welcome.
I know your time is valuable, even though you're retired. And I appreciate your company. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Great. Thank you, Daria. And you too. You as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.